This is Joseph Flatley, and you are listening to episode 6 of The So-Called Prophet from Pittsburgh. After this, we have 2 more episodes, and they are not done yet, so I thought I'd try a little something different. We're going to play an extended interview with a person named David. He doesn't want us to use his last name. At the time of the interview in spring of 2019, he was 45. And he was in the community in the GCCA from 1999 until 2009. And you'll hear more of David's story next week when we pick up the investigation. Thanks for listening.
But who knows, especially from the people that we've talked to, have found themselves in situations where they're, sharing their husband or their wife, and they never thought they would be doing that before. So, 20 years later, let's put on our Nikes and drink the Kool-Aid and jump on the comet.
Yeah, it's a compelling topic that is important to expose. Mm-hmm. to keep it in check as much as possible, because it can, even like Jim Jones, for example, was a social activist early on in the career. I mean, it seemed like they were doing good stuff. Yeah. They were really with the people, really with poor people, helping. It seemed like really helping out for years and years and years. Mm-hmm. And any organization could do that for years and years and years, and then something happens, or the leader in leadership goes a little wonky, or they, it goes off the rails, or gets really pressured and, makes bad decisions, or legal, makes money, gets, anyways.
Yeah. So, we are recording.
Okay.
And what was your cosmic name when you were in the group?
My cosmic name was Alveed.
How do you spell that?
Alveed.
And how did you find out about the group and end up joining?
Well, I was invited to do a garden internship at the Tree of Life Center in southern Michigan, or southern Arizona, down in Patagonia. And when I arrived there, things didn't work out. They were going through some transition, so I was looking for another place, and I felt a calling to get into gardening and really get into the earth, get my fingers in the earth and get grounded out in that way. And so I went looking, and I found an article in Communities Directory for the community in Sedona, and it said organic gardening and stuff. So I called them up, and they said, yeah, come on up. And then within a week, I went up and had a meeting, did an interview, and said that's what I'm looking for. And at that time, I wasn't looking for any type of spiritual community. I didn't know what was going on there, except in their description. I'm sure it said spiritual community or something, but it said organic gardening and natural lifestyle or whatever it said. And so that was my focus. When I then did a meeting, they said, well, we study this book, the Urantia book. And I said, honestly, I'm not interested in reading any more books. I've had enough. And it was Marita Singh in the office. She said, well, this is what we do. And so we do have classes and stuff. And I said, okay, fine, I'll check it out. And, I am a curious, open person. So I, looked into that and started reading it. But my main purpose and drive was to learn how to garden and get into organic gardening at first. Yeah.
And what was your educational background?
I have a dual degree in comparative religion and Western philosophy from Western Michigan University.
In your education, did you see a lot about like new religious movements or any of the things that would kind of relate to what Gabriel was doing?
Yeah, some. So that's part of what actually kept me there for so long. Is my whole adult life then I've been on pursuit of meaning, truth, and natural philosopher. So a love of wisdom and in all traditions worldwide. So I've traveled all over and lived with a variety of people from different religions. I've lived with Sikhs and Muslims, and grew up Christian, Presbyterian. I live with Buddhists, and I've participated in their ceremonies and prayers, and went to their different temples and mosques and so forth. And I'll continue to do that my whole life. I'm very interested in comparative religion and philosophies, and history also just ties right in with that. So part of the interest in the community was kind of that part of me as an observer learning. I'm fascinated with belief systems. I'm fascinated with human psychology, and there you go. It was a great bubble to observe and study that.
So what was the kind of child raising philosophy of the group, and how is it different than kind of what you have outside of the group?
Well, let's see. I mean, the community is really, there's, so a lot of the community beliefs I didn't completely acquiesce to. They have, so they're very alternative to mainstream in every way, and I am too in a lot of ways, but I didn't agree with their for one example, their viewpoint that the world outside the community was just a fallen world, and there's no hope or worth to be out there, living your lives, or going through the motions, whatever. I have lots of friends and family out of the community that I knew were good people and doing good. And so raising the children like that, with, in a bubble, with not interacting with the outside world, is one part that it doesn't prepare the children for dealing with the outside world if they ever leave. For example, they're very much, the beliefs are very insular. So what they're doing is it's the best thing possible, and they think they've got it figured out on how to raise kids into godly beings, and they have all the information that the children need. Gabriel would give information about children and what their soul is all about, or how they need to be treated and raised too. So that's another kind of quirk of within the community.
How does just the kind of the raising of the children on that basic family level differ, or does it differ from?
Yeah, a lot different. Not necessarily that much different from other spiritual communities. If you went and looked at a whole bunch of Amish and different kibbutz communities in Israel, and all sorts of, did a spectrum, you'd find a lot of similarities, I'm sure. But it's farm and homeschool and kind of intentional community living, so a lot of co-parenting and these kind of things. So there were good aspects of that, like you would find in a whole lot of these spiritual kind of communities. The difficulties and kind of controversial things, again, not necessarily unique to that community, but problematic. I mean, raising children, period, is challenging and difficult. Wherever you're doing it, mainstream, modern world, it's challenging. Then single parenting, I've been single parent for 10 years, challenging. In the community, yeah, they really mix it up. So they take kids away from parents. Well, first of all, they section everything off really, really strongly. So people keep to themselves and keep in their own areas and zones and out of other people's business. So even if we were friends in the community, for example, if something's going on with your children, and then you would be having meetings in private, and it would get, your scenario, you get moved to a different house or this or that. I might not know anything that's going on with that unless I'm, living right there with you and asked to be some part of it. Like I'm helping to watch your child, and then I'm asked to, take them on these nights and give you more of a break. You're going to have more space or live somewhere else. So definitely dividing parents and kids up in different ways, having children parented by other adults, and sometimes separated, and sometimes really not allowed. Like my son, at a certain point before we left, was not allowed to stay over in the house where his mom lived, and so a lot of different reasons they would do these kind of things. I was the caregiver for different people's kids at different times, so a lot of variance in different scenarios with parents and families, kind of all over the board, how they would do things.
So, when people think of communes, they think of communities, they think of like one big group, we're all into this together, kind of egalitarian, but you're really describing a very stratified kind of, community where people are kind of isolated from each other in different little, units. I don't know what you would call it.
I mean, the community has been in existence since 89. Technically, they say they founded it then. So it's really evolved and changed over the years. So I can't comment on what happened before I got there, only what I heard. Can't comment on what's happened after I left. But while I was there, I saw a lot of changes. And in part, what I saw change is going from looser to stricter and stricter and stricter. So more and more delineations and divisions and segmented out, and more, you could call them like committees or areas of function, more and more kind of drilled down on compartmentalizing and to a T, like right down. There wasn't any real areas in the community, like year by year, that weren't separated and organized in certain ways. So everyone knew their roles and how they related and what they were supposed to do and their duties and functions, and including then parenting and with kids and schedules. And there was not a lot of loose, or almost no, if any, like really loose room to make your decisions of how you live your life. And so in terms of a whole kind of communal, overarching energy, sure, it's there, but the community wasn't doing everything together, just kind of like in a helpful way, jumping in and seeing where needs were. It was really kind of regimented and figured out, and would constantly shift and change. So if you got settled into an area or into a home in a routine, then it would be changed, so often that it kind of kept people discombobulated in some ways, if you couldn't just continue to flow and flex with that. And that's part of, that's a common trait in cult's period, is really keeping people so regimented on their schedules, and changing their lives around so much constantly that they can't think straight or kind of get settled into a space where they can really step back and see what's going on. Constant change like that, until being told what to do and the next thing, and more responsibilities, heaped on them and so forth.
I got my hands on like a pile of documents related to the group, like memos from Gabriel or Neon to different people, and like instructions for I was just really struck by how so many things that we take for granted in daily life, like taking your shoes off before you go into the house, or whether you put your vegetables in paper or plastic bags, like was under the control of the group. And Gabriel had an opinion about it, or Paladin had an opinion about it. It was pretty, it really speaks to what you're saying about everything being regimented and organized, and the kind of mania for organization that the group had.
Yeah, things are really controlled there, controlled to a T. Yeah.
Did you ever find yourself in a PRP program?
I did get put on that at the end, and it's one of the things that allowed me to allowed me to leave, as they put me on the program for reasons that weren't true. Some things happened, and then came to me and told me what happened. And I said, no, let me clarify this. And they didn't listen to me, and then put me on this program. Then they, two in leadership. And so it certainly came down from Gabriel, because everything gets okayed by him on these levels. They tried to extort money from my parents. They asked me to send a letter from my parents telling them what had happened and asking them for $14,500 to pay for this program. That allowed me to see things more clearly, and that if they're doing it to me, they must be doing it to other people, and that I was able to ask Mariah, and Trente was the other one in charge of my program that I was meeting with. I was able to ask them directly, like, what does this money go for? Because I said, I'm still managing, I'm in a foreman position over the whole gardens. I'm still managing visitors and guests and community members that come every day with their schedules. I'm still the primary caregiver over my son. Like, nothing in my life has changed responsibility-wise, except I'm having a 1-hour meeting every week. And so what does the money go towards? And she just, in that meeting, just looked at me and said, I think we'll end the meeting here.
What kind of preparations did you have to do, in your head, but also practically over that year to make your escape?
Yeah, it was the most intense and hardest year of my life. I had to unravel my belief systems and guilt about leaving, loyalty. They put a lot of stress on loyalty, and that, you're called and this is what you're supposed to do. This is your destiny. That's a big loaded, big heavy kind of thing there. This is what you're supposed to do. So I had to unravel that. Luckily, I had the background I had with comparative religion and other systems and stuff, that I knew there was a lot more out in the world. Other people in the community that don't have that background, it's like all they know. So for them to unravel that psychologically and emotionally, a lot more difficult. It's unique for everyone, but I had to go through that. And early on then so it went through this inward processing and meditating and praying and reflecting on it, what that could look like, and worked through that. And I never got any feeling or any sense that I was going against God or doing the wrong thing, that I needed to do that. I had seen enough over the years and enough problems, and especially I knew that was unethical and wrong, extortion, and that pressure on me, and then against my son and against my family outside of the community, that disrespect and so forth. So that it was time to move on. So then I began a series of private and secret communications. Luckily, I had a relative on the outside, some different relatives and people I knew that helped me, and I got in touch with a lawyer in Tucson, and I arranged it was some of the most difficult things I've ever done in life. I had to arrange a meeting in secret. I had to get off the property and to go meet with him, get permission to get off the property, go meet with him in private. And so one of the first questions that we talked about was my son. And I said to the lawyer, I can't take my son. He said, what's your plan with your son? I said, he has to stay because his mom's in the community, and, how could I take him from the community? And he said, well, what's your plan with custody after that? And I said, well, we'll go to court, and I'll seek to have parental rights and share custody and so forth. And he said, well, how are you gonna tell the judge that you feel that you want to have custody, and that he shouldn't stay in the community full time with his mother if you leave him there when you go? I said, well, it's pretty safe for a 5-year-old, but he said, still, my point is, if you leave him there, then the judge is going to say you felt safe enough that he could be there. Like, why should he not stay there with his mom and everybody that he grew up with. So I realized, oh my gosh, that I need to take my son if I'm going to argue that I need to have parental rights instead of leaving him, because then the argument would be from their side is he left. What a terrible father. He just left his son. He ran away, So I said, oh my God, this is even a bigger deal that I have to figure out how to take my son out. And I can't speak with his mother about it.
And how'd you end up back in Michigan?
Well, yeah, so we went through all these legal proceedings, mediation, then court for custody. I had over 10 community members testify against me in the court case. They mostly testified for his mother. So it wasn't a whole bunch of dirt on me. They didn't really have anything on me. So I prevailed in that, and we had a joint custody. I lived not far from the community. Purposely, I moved up to Green Valley, half an hour north, so that my son could continue to see his mother. I didn't leave because of his mother. She's not a terrible person. I left because of circumstances and my unfolding understanding about the cult nature and Gabriel and extortion and so forth. But I wanted my son to see his mother. That was important. So I had custody, so we did shared custody for a period. Then my son he started saying things that concerned me that I could see were things said to him. He came and told me, he started expressing anger, and understandably, it's a tough situation. I took him from his mother, but he said, I ran away from eldership. I didn't want to listen to eldership, and that I'm running away from God. And so these weren't his own thoughts. I knew that these are from his mother or other people. So I talked with him about that. He was experiencing more confusion then. And so legally, it gets into these legal matters with talking to kids in those circumstances and disparaging other. It came out then that I was being disparaged. He eventually came. I had a partner then after a bit that moved in with us. And she came to me one day and said, I need to talk with you about something that your son has confided in me with, and I feel concerned and bad about this because it's going to change our relationship forever, but we have to talk. And so my son had gone to her and confided that she couldn't trust me. I was a liar, so forth, and said, oh my gosh, this is what he's being programmed with, so we need to address this ASAP. And so I contacted a child psychologist, hired a child psychologist to meet with my son and interview him. His mother found out right before the meeting and spoke with him and headed it off so that he clamped up and wouldn't talk too much with the psychologist, but he did get some observations out of that we went back to court with and filed for relocation. I realized that I've got to go farther away from this community, that this is happening. My son was told, I don't know all that he was told, but what he shared then with my partner, what came out was, he said so Amadon, the son of Gabriel, came to my son and told him that Platon said for my son to stand up to me, that I was going against God, and basically to rebel against me, and that I was a liar and so forth. This is like being told, that God has come and spoken, and so then, my son was confused about that. So I filed, and then he went against my partner, who previously he had related to like a new mother, a second mother, and had a beautiful relationship. So then he came back a little later and said that she's the court's little reporter. Obviously not his own thoughts, because I never mentioned court once to him. He had no idea from my side that his mother and I were going to courts. So illegal activity to talk to the child about this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Would you say that? Would you characterize it as like manipulating or
for sure,
messing with his mind?
It's mind control. It's manipulation. It's outright lying to innocent child, 5-year-old child. I mean, they don't have their own, hardly what they can distinguish between, truth and falsity, that they just trust. At that age, he trusted all adults around him. He never had any experiences to not trust by that age. So we went back to court. Again, they had over 10 community members testify against me, and the community psychologist, Mariah, testified, and she tried to slander me and created a false diagnosis of me that I had never heard of before, and we had never talked of once in 10 years of counseling and so forth.
So you're saying that Mariah testified as your therapist or as your counselor?
Yep. So on stand, she lied. She manufactured a diagnosis.
Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, she said I have a narcissistic personality disorder. And my lawyer we looked at each other and he said, well, doesn't everyone have something like that? But I had never heard of that before, and Mariah had never said it. So the judge actually ruled, the judge rolled her eyes because Mariah said other things. Anyways, I was granted permission to relocate to Michigan, where I'm from and where have relatives and friends and so forth. So that's how I ended up back here in 2011.
How old is your son?
He's almost 16 now.
How's he doing? Does he like Michigan?
Yeah, I think so. He's caught up in the whole teenage world, but he likes his high school here.
You live in an intentional community now.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us a little bit about that and, why you've made this choice and how it's different than what you were in before?
Yeah, I believe in community. My whole adult life, I've sought community and built community and lived within a variety of different kind of community settings, both secular and different spiritual groups. So I've experienced a kind of a wide array of what that looks like. Here in community here where I live presently is co-housing, which is a real kind of safe and standard and legal model now that comes from Europe and is becoming more popular across the nation because it's gone through, it's had a process for some decades now of going through county, township kind of ordinances and laws and figuring out how it relates legally and how it's accepted. So they're officially condominiums and so pretty, let's see, as I was sharing earlier, pretty mild form of community. So as much commitment and energy as you really want to put into it. Some people just live here as a condominium apartment, and other people really are really active and having work days and events and so forth. I love community, though. I believe in the village kind of model that we lack so much in this culture. And I've lived in different places. I've traveled in the world on 5 continents and seen a lot of different, more communal and more, village-like settings and neighborhoods and people that know each other and help each other. And this is what I believe in. So I'll always be connected or live in different forms of community in my life.
The Gabriel experience didn't sour you to communal life?
No, it was really informative and it was a really helpful experience in a whole lot of ways. Now I grew and have come to understand human belief systems, human psychology, and limitations of human nature and so forth in a much more thorough and clear way to live the rest of my life through this. And I know what community takes and how hard it is and how, human ego and power and control issues, how they come into everything and how challenging that is and difficult it is to deal with in community models and people in general. So yeah, it brought me a lot more awareness around spiritual teachers and leadership and community styles and and so forth, the problems that we had there and what works and doesn't, but it doesn't scare me off from community period or spirituality or, a lot of things. I'm able to kind of sift through that now.
This is Joseph L. Flatley, and you are listening to The So-Called Prophet from Pittsburgh. If you want to check me out on Instagram or Twitter, my username is @PGHProphet. Or if you don't like social media, you can also reach me through my webpage at lennyflatley.net.